right. Well, thank you everybody for listening to another episode of Simply Finance with Shane White. Today, I am pumped to have Hudson on the podcast. I'll let him give a little background into himself. He's actually started quite a bit of different companies. So most recently Plant People, but Hudson, thanks for coming on. And do you mind giving a little intro to yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Should I start how far do you want me to go back
You
of
know,
my
it's funny. I was
background?
looking at your LinkedIn. I was like, damn, he's done a lot of stuff. Wherever
I
you
know.
normally kind of like give the normal spiel, I think you can kind of pick because
I
you've done a
know.
lot. You have a lot in your background.
Un- It's so funny. It feels like I've done a lot and I've lived so many lives. And that's not really bragging because there hasn't been any major exits. So it feels like I've been in startup mode since I graduated. I
Which is
don't know
kind
if
of
that's a
fun.
good thing. Yeah, I mean, you learn a lot. Let's just
Right.
say I've also aged. I'm like thinning on top of my hair right now. Anyways, yeah, so I mean, from New York, born and raised from Brooklyn. I'm a Brooklyn boy. Was here all my life until college, went to Brown, graduated in '09. I actually, that was a terrible time to graduate. The month
Oh
I
yeah.
graduated, there were 800,000 job cuts. It was the recession, or the
Yeah.
Great Recession, I guess is now the term. And so it was actually a really humbling experience. And now going through this with COVID, I feel way more grounded. And I feel like I've kind of like seen it. We haven't seen what's happened for example, in New York City where I'm based,
Right.
similar to recession. But yeah, I mean, like a lot of the stores in Soho were boarded up for a period of time and nothing was in there. So, but yeah, so I was very lucky, and then I kind of caught the early tech scene. Um, in 2009 when there wasn't really one in New York City. So I ended up got offered a job at Google in California, and it was like
Oh,
that company was like 15,000 people at the time, which was a lot. Now it's huge, even
sure.
bigger.
Yeah, it's nothing then
And
compared to now.
then I looked up a company called Guilt Group, um, and I saw like in like some article. I thought it was really cool. I joined when it was 15 people, left when it was 2,000 people, and I helped launch their home business, food and wine, and international verticals,
Oh, cool.
and then did some partnership stuff. I was definitely didn't know any better. First job, was just broken up with, and so it made my life. I didn't take a vacation for the first year and a half. I'm not kidding.
Oh, gee.
And I was like that go-getter where they would just throw things at me, and I was very lucky because it was an e-commerce boot camp.
Okay.
And so I was able to learn how to like build sort of like businesses from the ground up. Obviously, I had amazing partners. Guild Group hired extremely talented people. Um, it's actually amazing looking back. So many of those people have started companies now. But they really gave me the reins on a lot of launching of the verticals. So was there for 3 years, and then went and started a company, founding team, and was COO of a company called Aloha in the supplements world. And
Oh,
very early on in the plant-based sort of like protein and plant-based herbal supplements world, was awesome company. Was there from the ground up, everything from branding, supply chain, customer experience. I was like overseeing majority of the ops. Um, and then when I had left that company, one of the learnings I had was, you know, at Aloha, we were trying to perfect, like, become the Apple of supplements. We were trying to create these crazy products that needed so much explaining. And I was like, what I really want to do is create a product that people already use, but better. And I was like thinking of what I use at high clip every day, which is coffee. And I love coffee, but I'm a black coffee drinker. And I ended up, wanting to drink something more,
okay.
that wasn't like as black and dark, and wanted something with some flavor without any sugar, etc. And so I ended up starting a company called Rise Coffee, and ended up meeting some co-founders along the way, about a year in or 6 months in. And so I did that, and I also had a digital branding firm called Crosby. We did business strategy, so we actually built over 400 fundraising decks,
Oh,
and that
wow.
and that
Oh,
yeah,
that's
Crosby
pretty.
was
That's
sorry.
that put you in a good spot just for future whatever,
Yeah.
future endeavors, building that many investment decks.
I mean, I'm a nerd with fundraising decks and decks in general.
Okay.
And so if anyone ever wants to send one to me, I can always critique. I might not do any work on it, but I'm happy to be like, this slide needs to go here, or like,
That's awesome. I
everyone
mean,
read
it's a
left to right.
huge skill.
Yeah. I was actually like a managing partner of an agency at that time that was doing that
Okay.
stuff. And then I went and started my own. And then I ended up getting into Plant People out of sort of like a personal injury. And I transitioned out of Crosby and also Rise, although I'm on the board for Rise now.
Got it. Love it. Love it. Yeah, you've done a ton of stuff in a really it's a short amount of time. I mean, it's you talk about all that. It sounds like you've been doing this for 20 years. It's not that long a time you've been working on all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm grateful, especially for the early days of like energetic Hudson. I'm exhausted now.
Yeah.
Because I was also doing like nonprofit stuff. I was advising people. I was really all over the
Yeah, you
place,
had
and
a
I'm
bunch of advisory roles I saw. So
yeah.
yeah.
I really like it was interesting, and I took a break from all of it. Like I stopped doing advising, I stopped doing nonprofit stuff. I was doing Plant People, Crosby, and Rise at the same time at one point. And ever since I like just stopped everything, it's just been such a healthier life to really be focused. And so yeah, it's nice to be laser focused on something and not have my brain freaking out. Because when you're done with like
Yeah.
stress on one thing, your brain leads to the second thing of like another company that you have like stress points on, and it just
Right, I'm
never sort of
sure.
ends.
Yeah, it had to have been just a complete circle all the time, just going
Yeah,
from one thing to the next. Got it. That's really cool. Thank you for giving that background, Hudson.
for sure.
I know I want to spend most of the time talking about Plant People because obviously that's your current endeavor. I
Cool.
did have a few questions. So with Rise Brewing, um, I think it's interesting. Anything in the coffee space, I'm a big coffee drinker and love that. What was like so you were working at the supplement company. What was like the spark that would just made you like think of like, the coffee that's out there is not good enough. I want to make my own. I'm just so curious of like
Yeah.
that whole concept development from you.
Yeah, so I was touching on it a little bit. So basically, I went backpacking for like 6 months
Oh,
after
cool.
the supplements brand. And I was like thinking, and when I was thinking about coffee, how I didn't want to, I saw all my friends were getting like frappuccinos and lattes, but I didn't want dairy, anything heavy, but I wanted something different. Like coffee got really dull and it was just too dark or like burnt after a while. And you just had
Yeah.
that like acidic taste, even though I love black coffee. I like it light, I like it like clean. And so I started fishing around and I started talking to some people that were in the space and they're like, wow, I totally get what you're saying. One thing you should check out is I've seen some brewers infuse cold brew with coffee with nitrogen. I was like, what? Really? That sounds cool. They're like, yeah, it's just like a Guinness, literally a Guinness, but cold brew. And I was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
okay. And so this guy at this coffee place down south basically made a mini keg for me and he's like, you should try it. So I had like 100 servings and it was a mini keg, overnighted. I tried it. I was like, this is incredible. This is
Whoa.
amazing. Yeah, and so this was a time I had never seen it anywhere else. I ended up doing
Okay.
some research and like someone in Texas was starting to work on it and they had to start playing around with kegs too and like sort of like marketing it. No one was really like marketing it. Even though it was really easy in a way, it's literally like you take a liquid and you fuse it with nitrogen like a keg. It's like that's all you do.
Yeah.
You obviously have to like perfect it and do it right, which is what I think Rise has done. But yeah, so I started doing that. I was like, well, how do you make it like consumable? Like, how do you make it like a ready to eat or drink or ready to something that like has scale? Because I thought the keg industry was cool, but I didn't think it was going to have that much scale. And
Yeah.
so he pointed me in the direction of these like cans, and then he ended up getting me some samples, and I had to make it. And he was just like helping out in the beginning. I mean, he
Oh,
made
that's wild.
200. I mean, we paid for it,
Sure.
or I paid for it. I was by myself at the time, and I made 200 nitro cold brew coffee cans that were blank, and no one else was really doing it on the market at that time. And I had them in my fridge, stocked. Like my roommates at the time were like, "The fridge is full. Where are we going to put our groceries? Where are we going to put
We have
food?" They
tons
were
of
so
coffee,
annoyed.
but nothing else.
Yeah. But they were like drinking. They're like, this is amazing. And like my best friend came over. He's like, Hudson, you have to start this company. Like these are amazing. I've never had anything like it. And they made that growling noise, that widget cans that
Love it.
that
Yeah.
noise. I don't know if you know, there's like a
Yeah, I
noise that
do.
they make.
Yeah.
And and I ended up giving it to a couple people. And I remember when I was starting my previous company, we met with this guy Andrew Essex at a company called Droga 5. They're like the best video making, commercial making company. They've won like agency of the year like 10 years in a row. It's
Oh,
nuts.
wow. Okay.
And I was like, dude, I have to tell you about this thing. It's kind of secretive. Do you have time to like try it out? I go into the office and it's kind of like Mad Men-esque. I feel like I'm like, it's a huge office. It's like my biggest meeting ever. I'm like wearing the blazer
Oh, yeah.
and I go in there and I give him a sample of the can and he opens and it makes that growl, that noise, which I think Rise, we now call it the Rise roar or growl. I don't
Oh,
know, just
cool. I like
roar.
that. Yeah.
And he just looks at me like amazed, like goosebumps, drinks it, puts it down, walks up to his like window office, closes the curtain, and he's like, Hudson, I'm a marketer. I make commercials. I've had Coca-Cola in this office. I've had Pepsi in this office. I've had every single beverage company in this office, CEOs, and I've never seen anything like it. He was like,
Whoa.
this is something that can really catch on, and it's because of that noise. So, the Coca-Cola noise where you and you like drink in, it's like you're like, ah. So
Yeah.
he was like, that's the new noise. And that gave me sort of the energy. Shout out to Andrew. I haven't really spoken to
That's
him in a
so cool.
while, but like giving me that nudge of validity.
Okay.
And sort of speeding up, I went outside of a Whole Foods, started selling them for $1 each to see if people would even convert. And
Okay.
they're blank
So you're
cans.
just
I
like
was doing
walking
it.
around the street selling them for
No,
$1.
I set up a table outside of a Whole Foods downtown Manhattan. Didn't tell I didn't ask for permission. I just did it. And I asked how much they would pay for it and if they liked it.
That
And
is
it was really
awesome.
interesting
Scrappy.
feedback. Nitro was very scary back then.
Oh,
Anyways, just to speed up, I mean, the term nitro was like freaky. Like to have like a mother buy the word nitro on packaging just sounded
yeah.
like a
Yeah,
wrestler
sure.
in like a can. So
Right.
it sounded like scary. And so I think that was something that I had to work through and the team had to work through. But speeding up 6 months, I had made a lot of progress, was ready to raise, had a brand in place, had a lot of like the fundraising deck. Had made a lot of progress, supply chain, formula, and ended up meeting these guys that were working on something similar. Kind of a funny story how that happened. But basically through a mutual friend who's now on the board, he basically was like, what are you up to? I told him about these cans. He's like, oh, my friends are working on something related with kegs. You should meet them, doing the same thing, but in kegs. And we kind of like combined forces and, we've been friends since. And, they're really operating the company now. I mean, I was part of it. I was full time with part of it for, at least like 3 to 4 years, maybe 4 years, 5 years. And now I've obviously I'm focusing on plant people, but like really proud of them because they've been really spearheading and growing that company much farther than I think we as a team could ever have thought of. So it's really been exciting to see, and the company's really taken off, and it's always great as a board member to see where it is today.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And then the is was the I know the main focus cans and kegs for like offices. That was kind of like the main thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, great
Is that
question.
I was gonna
So
say, is it pivoted now?
yeah, so that's a really great question. So the cans were hard to get. They're not made here in the United
Oh,
States
okay.
yet. And so you had to order like 500,000 cans. And for a small startup, you're like, what are we gonna do with 500,000 cans? Actually, someone helped store them for us who's a friend of mine for free
You have a
from my
good
previous
network, Hudson.
company.
You got
I know. Well, a
yeah,
lot of
you always these
people
connections.
I all it's you're only as good as your community. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Especially in the early days. It's all founders always ask for favors, especially if you're bootstrapping, which I'm always bootstrapping. And we what we ended up doing, and I'll give a shout out to the rest of the team, Jarrett and Justin, and Graham, but I think specifically Jarrett had a friend at a restaurant called now I'm blanking it was on Atlantic Avenue, Colony, and in Atlantic Avenue, New York. And we had made these kegs. Kegs were easier again to make, and so we go up to them with a mini keg. Hey, do you want to try this? We're thinking about doing cans, but it's a lot of work. Blah blah blah. We have to learn how to can them. They're really hard to can. But like, hey, why don't you try this keg? The guy tried it. We didn't hear from him for a day. We were super nervous. All of a sudden, he responds, "Hey, can we get 2 kegs for the weekend?" We're like, "Whoa!" Like
Whoa.
restaurants want this. And then he started ordering went from like a quarter, like a 6 barrel to a half barrel. It started growing. And one thing that back to the community, I was really like in the tech community. I had a
Okay.
lot of connections. And so we kind of caught the whole coffee, cold brew, keg thing in the office very early. And, I was extremely involved in closing the first couple hundred like office accounts,
Oh,
big ones
awesome.
too.
Yeah.
And then the team really supplemented as well. And we were kind of doing it everywhere. And so we were primarily a keg business for the first like year and a half, 2 years, leveraging our community. And obviously, as that grew, we were, I think, at least in 2,000 offices throughout the United States at
Wow.
the highest. And the best part about that business, it's dropping off caffeine in a beehive.
I was gonna
It's
say,
like
right?
you leave it there, people drink it, and they just reorder. And especially the big tech companies. I mean, we were in the Facebook office, and I think we were like in Microsoft. I mean, we were like in these huge
Major
offices
with
pumping,
tons
and it's
of
like
people.
subscription, high
Yeah.
price point, and it just gets like volume moving, you know.
Yeah.
And it was a really great opportunity, to be frank, to get people like addicted to the product
Oh, I
in their
bet.
office because it's free, and then they go home or they like go to the supermarket and they want the cans eventually. And that was sort of like our early backdoor marketing.
Makes so much sense. We didn't have Rise. We had a different brand in the office at our X bar, and I mean, the moment it came in, it was like an announcement. And then to your
I
point,
know.
it was like, I mean, the keg was gone in a day or two. It seemed like it always seemed like we were like empty for 5 days out of the 7. You know what I mean? It was like there was just never
Yeah,
enough.
I know. Well, the funny thing about, so we had one of my co-founders from Rise, Justin. He's a good-looking dude for sure. And so like the women who would always like be in the office, like he was like known as the guy who'd come in like big like guy, and he would come in with like a keg, and he'd walk in, and like it was just always like a thing whenever
That's
the
funny.
coffee guy came. It was like the milkman was like the new age milkman, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. So then did you like has that changed at all? I'm sure with COVID that's been kind of a tough
Yeah. So
environment then.
yeah, so luckily, I think there's like two types of brands right now with COVID. There's the ones that were already on shelves doing great. The ones that like in terms of cans, the ones that were not on shelves, new brands, didn't do so great because like essential critical stores didn't pick up the new brands. They didn't want to touch them, didn't want to deal with them
Makes
during
sense.
the COVID height and craziness. Rise was lucky to be on the former, which was on shelves. So cans have really skyrocketed. Everything from just starting with stockpiling to where it is now. I mean, the momentum is very high for cans. The keg business definitely took a hit. I mean, there's no more offices.
Right.
So that business, and we were like in stadiums. I think we were like
Wow.
also in locker rooms of like
So they had
really
like
like
cold brew
pro
coffee
teams.
at like it's professional sporting events.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
that's
we were
cool.
doing
I didn't know
that. We were
that.
sports teams. We were doing, I don't know if you know Rise well, but we're very well known for field marketing. And we would
Yeah.
obviously have cans, but we would also have kegs, and we would always do festivals, concerts. Unfortunately, all that has gone dark, but at the same time, like it's actually helped us supply chain wise change the business and exclusivities nationally and stuff. So it's actually, I think long term, it's going to be better for the business in terms of like exclusivities that we had, but also, I think we've been able to actually double down on the e-com side of the business, and that's doing really well. I think we're like top 10 on Amazon for
Oh, that's
canned
fantastic.
coffee. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. Well, it sounds like that was quite the endeavor, and it sounds like
yeah,
your connections was a key part of a lot of that, and just kind of going with the idea and taking it to market. It sounds like that was, didn't sound like there was much more, you could do besides getting on the street and getting feedback right away early on.
totally. Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that I tell entrepreneurs, not to say I'm like I know what I'm talking about, um, is I think like you learn more in the 60 days in market than you do 6 months preparing for the brand. Like you just got to get it out, get people's perspective, talk about the pricing, talk about what like just learn what's intriguing about the product. And so I always say just get to market. And I think that was when I was planning Rise in the early days, everything really sped up when I went to like the street and started just selling them for $1 each, even though I
Oh,
was
I
like at a
bet.
loss.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. People can get stuck in the paralysis by analysis, not just getting it done, right?
For sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then, if we bounce to Plant People, which is your current endeavor and your main focus, what was when? I guess probably be helpful to give the audience. I know the backstory, but it'd be helpful to give the audience at least some sort of a understanding of like how that idea came to fruition and meeting your co-founder Gabe, and just kind of the background of Plant People.
For sure. Would love to. So Gabe and I were actually friends prior, and we were introduced to be potentially roommates. We never worked out. Ended up meeting at a party in person separately, and we were on a hike around 5 years ago, talking about we both had spinal surgery, learn how to walk again. How
Oh
we didn't
wow,
want to
yeah.
take pharmaceuticals, which are addictive, expensive, straight up chemicals, make you feel weird, and how we wanted to use like plant-based products or natural products on our way to recovery. So we started exploring adaptogens, nootropics, cannabis, so CBD, which at the time there was only one store in New York City selling it. This was like 5 years ago. And we were kind of doing our own other business stuff aside from this. And so we started like getting samples from a farm. We started using it. We were having an amazing impact from it. Started giving to friends and family. My mom was using it. Everyone was loving it. People were sleeping better than ever. No back pain, no neck pain. It was pretty incredible. And everyone would say, hey, if you go back to that farm, we'll buy some from you. So Gabe and I looked at each other and we're like, wow, if we create a livelihood around helping people, let's go ahead and do that. And so that's what we did. And we launched about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now. And it's been an amazing ride. I mean, even though we don't do just CBD anymore, we've always planned on, we're plant people. We've always planned on celebrating all plants and doing that. We really built a strong foundation in CBD. But the cool thing is we always refer to the CBD trend as a wave. So we were like we always like envision it like we were on surfboards on our stomach, sort of like, looking out for like the best wave. We saw this like CBD wave in the distance. We swam out. And we really feel like we kind of like got out there first, especially in New York City. Like West Coast had a lot of stuff going on with it. It was like really changing. And we swam out to wave and we've been riding it since. And so we've definitely made a name for ourselves in the early stages, especially in the New York City market. We built a really strong community, very similar to Rise, where we were very involved in like field marketing and and like in stores and at restaurants. But then it's obviously more of a clinical brand now. But it's been an amazing ride and it's really grown a lot. So
yeah, no, it's exciting. I'd be curious too. So back to when you were looking for like a plant-based medicine when you were going through like the spinal surgery and recovery, how did you find CBD brands back then? How were you trying to like use CBD and like, you actually felt like it worked, it helped, like that kind of background into the kind of the concept?
100%. I mean, I had been using THC just to go to sleep, and I would like take a hit of something, and I
Yeah.
would be like either too high or like it was just you'd wake up next morning like exhausted and like groggy, and that wasn't my goal. My goal was to like relieve pain, and so when I started taking CBD, I was like, this is it. Like I'm not high, and like I can take this whenever I want, and it actually helps me while I work and makes me less stressed. It was for me, it's always really worked. And now like our business has evolved where we use other cannabinoids like CBN and CBC and CBG, and like I use them sort of as like what I want for the day, or like
Yeah.
CBN for sleep. But like without a doubt, like and I don't want to make like a huge medical claim, but like this shit fucking works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse my
Yeah.
French.
No.
And it
That's
just like
fair.
by looking even customer reviews and I was really surprised and excited about this like plant that not that we found it. Hemp's been used for a long time, but it was really exciting to explain to a lot of people for a very long time. What it was and what it can do, and people would try and never hear about it, and then the next day report back that it worked.
Right. Yeah. I feel like the CBD industry has been like, I think between like regulations and like so much uncertainty, I always felt like it's kind of been this creeping thing in the background. And then now we're seeing brands really hop in and take advantage in different ways.
For sure.
It's really interesting. I know for me, I'm the same way. Like I've used them. I honestly have only used a couple brands. So
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt like it worked, but yeah, to your point, I've kind of had the same experience where I've always enjoyed the use of CBD.
There's definitely a lot of brands out there, and we see it all the time. We look at like a lot of lab reports from competitors, and we also like inquire on like how it's made and stuff like that. And there's a lot of crappy, sketchy stuff out there. I would say like the majority of the products out there aren't really living up to the testing that they report on,
Yeah, makes
which has
sense.
been really interesting, especially for CBN products. Like we have the most CBN denser. Um, Concentrated products, I think, on the market.
Oh
When
wow.
most people are
Yeah.
like championing that it's higher than most people. So
How has that been? Just like battling. I mean, that's kind of like originally. I remember when we first connected. I've always been drawn to you guys as like a brand I can trust in the CBD space, I guess for better
yeah,
words. And so, how has it been? Building a brand, building a business in this space when it does seem like there's just so many people and brands that are kind of cutting corners and not being as honest as they probably should be.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I think the big thing for us is like the brand's always been bigger than the product. And, as we've rolled into more herbal SKUs that don't have CBD or hemp, and like, we just rolled out with Immune Power, which
Yeah.
is really focused on immunity, and has mushrooms in it and vitamin C. And then we have all these other sort of herbal SKUs rolling out that are non-CBD. Like that's what we're about. We're about like taking plants that have worked for a long time, introducing modern technology, and turning them into products that are practitioner grade. So, you know, instead of having to go to an herbalist or a doctor to like go get like some sort of prescription, which obviously that's more pharmaceutical, or like get recommendations on products to use, our whole thing is bring practitioner grade to the people, and or like make advanced wellness accessible. And so
Got it.
that's like what we're after, and that's what our brand is stood for. And we plant a tree for every product sold. It's expensive to do, and we use sustainable materials, and we have like a certain vibe and aesthetic that I think that not only you would be interested in and feel like it's trusted, but also someone in their like 40s and 50s. Like we wanted to be
Right.
sort of a new age
Yeah.
like Solgar or Garden of Life.
Love it.
And I think the interesting thing about the CBD industry is there's so many vibey brands. I mean, it's incredible. There's like so many multicolored, like bright pastel color, Pantone color brands. And I think in the end of the day, like they're all like sort of eating at the same thing, and they may like be doing well really quickly, and they're like selling gummies that are high in sugar, and like they're catching the trend. But there's no sort of like long-term play. And like that's what we're
Yeah.
about. Like we want to be that next like huge Garden of Life that's majority sort of, volume in like Whole Foods and the supplement aisle. We really want to expand bigger and build a brand that can be something much more. And the other part is like, for the first time in my life, Plant People is my tool to make an impact on this planet. Like we've planted over 150,000 trees at this point, and
Wow.
that's thousands of cars off the road in a given year, and on average in the United States. And so like I'm extremely passionate about climate impact and change, and I think like this is just something much bigger than us, and we hope to be doing that much longer term. And I think, I hopefully that gives you some sort of context on how we like think about the brand.
Definitely.
And as we roll down to non-CBD stuff, like you can tell a lot of people really trust the brand. It's not a vibey brand, and so we may not have like the coolest influencers posting, but we're definitely getting like a lot of practitioners buying from us. We have we have everything together where a lot of retailers trust us, and we do a lot of education training, and like that's what we're about, is that long-term play.
Got it. No, that totally makes sense. It's great context. I think, when I first came across Plant People, and I had chatted with you earlier on, I guess the first thing I saw was like, oh, it's a CBD brand. And then as I've gotten to like follow the brand and learn more about it, it's very obvious that, yeah, you guys are like really on the whole plant movement, like the movement towards using all
Yeah.
sorts of plants, obviously, as you said. I think that's really powerful because I can't think of any other brands that are doing it that way. I think it's really smart. And it seems like you guys really tapping into, just that movement in general of people wanting to use plants more in their everyday lives. So it makes a ton of sense to me.
Well, I'm glad it's great to hear that it's resonating. I would
Yeah,
also say that, my co-founder Gabe, he's, he oversees marketing and also just communication in general, and he does all the education stuff. He produces all the products, not himself, but he's heavily involved in the product development process, like heavily with like doctors and scientists, et cetera. But
oh, wow.
he
Yeah.
like crafts a lot, and he's the vision for that. And so to hear that from you means that his job is successful, because that's all everything that he works on is tied to everything you just said.
Yeah,
So he's
100%.
awesome
Yeah,
for
he's
that,
doing a great job. I mean, I see it all the time, and I mean, definitely follow the brand thoroughly now. So
right?
definitely resonates with me. I totally understanding it. I think the coming out with the immunity power that you just talked about with mushrooms, that was, to me, we had chatted about this, but that was like a light bulb to me of like to me in this COVID environment, like what a great next step for the product
For
line and
sure.
for the brand. I think people are just, I mean, I would hope that's a product that I would think anybody, no matter your age, demographic, where you live, that's something that everyone's thinking more and more about, is just immunity right now. So
For sure. And I think like, it feels sort of advantageous of the situation. We were always planning on doing immunity. I
sure.
think the
Yeah. Yeah.
biggest thing is we asked our community, and we did the data, like, what do you want? And everyone wants immunity. So,
Yeah.
we had some great formulas that we were already working on. We're like, okay, let's fast track this. And the product that we launched today is LungGuard, which is great for respiratory support. And it's amazing for people that live in cities or anywhere near pollution, or if you're just like nervous about air pollution or pollutants in the air.
Oh, wow. I
But
haven't
also
seen
really
that
good
today yet.
for, yeah, and it's great for like athletes too, for like stamina, because
Love
it's all
it.
respiratory. So
Oh, that's exciting. Well, another
yeah,
great avenue for you guys to go down. That's fantastic. Is
totally.
the one question I had as we were just talking through this last piece was the planting a tree every time you sell a product. I thought that was like a really cool additive to being involved with the brand. How do you guys go about actually doing that and getting trees planted? I was very curious to know a little more about that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So we partnered with American Forest, which is an amazing organization. We're also partnering with Trees for the Future, which they plant mostly trees for the latter Trees for the Future plant mostly, I believe, in Africa, and then American Forest is American based, so the is doing a lot of reforestation and a lot of other initiatives, and um, aiming for tree equity in urban areas. So if you look at more poor neighborhoods, they don't have as many trees, and that creates like hotter neighborhoods. And there's a lot of other impacts in general for not having trees in those areas. But Gabe and I actually physically, so just like top line in terms of donation, we do all of our impacts mostly donation based,
Okay.
and so we plant a tree for every product sold, and so we donate to American Forest to do the job right and to do it like most effectively. We actually flew to Texas in the Lower Rio Valley and planted ourselves. So that
Oh,
was a
wow.
really amazing experience where we partnered with American Forest and a few other brands and companies that they work with. Um, and we went ahead and like planted a couple hundred trees, and it was sort of like a large field
Okay.
with a lot of students that were planting as well. And it was cool because you could see other sections of this massive field where they were reforesting, and you saw like huge like parts of the field that were like from 6 years ago, and then like 15 years ago, I
Oh, that's
believe, or
cool.
12 years ago. And you could see what you're doing now, but 6 years later, and then like
Right.
12 years later. And I gotta say, I mean, when you went to like the 12-year later area or the 20-year later area, it was like birds were flying around. I mean, ecosystems were being created.
That's so
It was
cool.
like out of like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
So, it's definitely an empowering part of the role, and I'm really excited that Gabe and I had the opportunity to actually go there and do it ourselves. Because I think the one thing that we don't want to come off as is like just hey, we like throw money and it solves the problem, and like we really want to be on the ground and do things locally. And we partner with another organization called the Hort, that does a lot of sort of like beautification and sort of like planting and maintenance of parks in New York City, amongst a
Oh,
bunch of
cool.
other things that they do.
Yeah. No, that's kind of wild. It's kind of cool to think that your products like come from plants and then, end of the life cycle of transactions. It's going back into the ground to kind of be regenerated. I think that's a pretty cool concept just in
For
general.
sure.
Are you, are you guys like, obviously you guys started and really like kind of created your base in CBD. You've branched into other plants. What is the plan? Or maybe you don't share, too much detail, but what is the kind of like the 1, 3, 5 year concept of plant people for everybody, and like where you guys want to go and how you want to evolve into more plants?
For sure. So I think like right now where we're at is with the CBD foundation we built, or the CBD related. Remember, we do CBN and CBG, and our skincare is CBC, which is great for redness. I can go on and
Oh
on.
yeah, you know all
All
those
of them
things.
have like other botanicals in them or other terpenes, or we don't just sell CBD oil. Just to be like super
Right.
clear on that
Yeah.
part of the business. So we were always that was our vertical. Now with the herbal SKUs, mushroom and immunity, and we have a brain focus SKU rolling out, which is I
Nice.
probably shouldn't have said. My
Yeah.
marketing person's probably going to be pissed because it's happening in the next few weeks. And that's like sort of our second leg to the stool. And so we
Okay.
have this like two-legged stool, and we're like, what do we do? And so the third-legged stool, we're going after another vertical in the supplement space, which we're really excited about. And then, uh, I think we want to have a table at some point. We want to have a four-legged table. And I think once we build that foundation, we're going to be set. We don't want to have too many products. We want to make sure we're doing all practitioner grade stuff for the people that are like clinical strength, and is, we have like 4 sort of like avenues of like our verticals that we go after. I think long term, I think there's like some not creativity. What's the word? Like, there's a little bit of a focus that I think long term we would really like to do something around like personalization. I think
Okay,
that's
yeah.
like just too far out from now, but I think the world that we live in right now is, no one wants to really buy just turmeric. They want to buy, or like ashwagandha, they want to buy something that's made for them because they have these problems, and we want to be able to provide solutions to each and every one of, um, for every problem that each customer has, and
Yeah.
sort of like build a relationship with them.
So you could kind of
And
like point out all the issues you have, and it would kind of connect you with the right product sort
sure,
of
or
idea.
yeah. And so I think like the thing is like, for me, I take almost every of our products, and not like a freak or like that guy that takes all of your company's products, but I use our Sleep for Sleep. It's incredible. It's an amazing
I haven't
product.
tried it yet.
I
I was gonna ask you, is it like, does it actually like knock you out and like make you
So
sleep?
that's the thing. It doesn't knock you out. It
Okay.
calms you down. It makes you. That's like the CBD side of it. I always like talk about. And then
Yeah.
the CBN really creates deep sleep. That's the best
Oh,
part.
okay.
So like
I'm
it
always
calms,
looking for
it like
better deep
chills you
sleep.
out, and you
Yeah.
slowly fall asleep, and then it keeps you asleep. And that's what most customers say is the deep sleep.
Got it. Okay.
Um, and then like I take the BCom before like big meetings or fundraising pitches or whatever, and that's an amazing product. I know people that take it every day. And then was like I was on vacation, as you know, and I was using our Nourish lotion for like sunburn, and just like when you're tan, you got to keep it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
And then face serum is amazing, and then like I do the face mask that we have like every few weeks. And so like that's what I mean is like we want to be there with you along the way of life all the time.
Got it. No, that
Um,
makes sense.
and so that's kind of how we're thinking, and hopefully it continues to head in that direction. And we're really excited to, as much as we're going to keep on doubling down in CBD, we're really excited to like get out of it, because the saturation in that market is just like ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
But there's a lot of consolidation right now, and so like we're going to keep on trying to inch up and lead in that category, as the sort of like consolidation happens, which has been actually really fruitful for us immediately.
No, I bet. Yeah, I bet. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think it's cool to see just like all these other aspects of how you can use plants. I think, especially if you're just getting into CBD or you're someone who uses CBD, to know that there's like all these other things that you can use plants for. I think
For sure.
it's pretty cool. What is just distribution at a high level look for you guys right now? Channels. I know you guys are in e-commerce, obviously. But
Hmm.
where can people like find you guys today, and where are you guys trying to go? I know even with COVID, things have changed a lot, but I've been seeing some big announcements recently from you guys of new distribution, which is really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm not going to release too many of them, but
Fair.
we're in a lot of boutique and indie spots, and that's where our foundation was. Very similar to Rise, we were like in these sort of smaller places, and so we're like we're in over like 1,200 like indie boutique like wellness spots, pharmacies, whatever. But we are in Wegmans, we are in Erewhon, we are in Mom's, Lucky's. We're going to be in HB in Central Market. We're going to be in Healthy Edge. We're on Thrive Market, Nordstrom, duty free stores, and there's obviously a bunch more. And we're really going after the natural specialty space. And I think
Okay.
like the hope down the line is we go more conventional. I don't think our brand and our price point is we're not in the right place to go into conventional. I think
Sure.
we do have Target, which is hush hush coming down the pipe. Um, but I think that's going to be really exciting to see how that works. And then I think as we grow in a business, I think conventional is where we want to head.
Gotcha. No, that's exciting. And then I know obviously we've talked a little bit about just with Amazon, like the CBD
Hmm.
products, they don't let you sell online yet, but are you guys,
Yeah.
I'm sure you're going with all your other plant products on
Yeah.
Amazon, would be the hope.
Yeah, so I think Amazon is definitely interesting. It's a beast.
Yeah.
And I think like it's really a beast as you start going into like the rankings right now. Like I think if we were to start now, it would take a few months to like get the hang of it. I think we're really interested in B2B marketplaces. We're interested, like Amazon, other ones, just say like an REI.com or something. Like
Sure.
we're
Yeah.
interested in more of those. Amazon's really interesting, especially for immunity, because it feels like, especially in this world, like people are just can't get enough immunity products, and Amazon's like the place to go to get it all. And so we're definitely exploring those channels. You just have to be careful because you don't really own the customer in Amazon. And so
Right.
like if someone searches you on Google, which we have great SEO, they're gonna just go to Amazon because it's Prime, and like they're already ordering a lot that way. And so
Yeah.
the question is like, do we want to be a wholesale business, or do we want to be an online business, or do you want to be both? And how does Amazon sort of impact the online business and also the wholesale business? Because a lot of people are used to going to stores to get our products now,
Right.
in store, and so if they can order on Amazon, that obviously makes an impact. So yeah, we're definitely exploring that. Our online business is doing really well, and we're going to keep on doubling down on that side.
Got it. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely it's like you said, it's a beast. It's very it can be like complex. And to your point, you really do lose the customer interaction that you get on your own D2C site, right? You kind of lose the message a little bit. And Amazon's a beast, just as far as like the business relationship with them. It can be a lot of orders, a lot of revenue, but also a lot of headaches. So,
For
it has
sure.
its double-sided thing. I think the last thing I thought of for plant people that I'd love to just get your perspective on is, obviously my listeners know I work for our X Bar full time. So I'm like in that space. We are definitely starting to think about, and we've been thinking about for a while, but just plant-based products and like where that trend is going. For you guys, I mean, I think you guys must be under the belief that it's, definitely less of a fad, but really like a trend that's going to grow and grow over time. Is that kind of for you guys where you think like some of the buying behaviors are going to move to is people are going to move more and more to plant-based products just in general?
I mean, 100%. That's what's been happening the last like 2 decades,
Right.
especially the last decade. I mean, it's plant-based is going to continue to be moving. I mean, look at like Beyond Me, all the plant-based foods. It's incredible to watch. I'm a vegetarian, so I love this stuff. And I think that plant-based will continue to be moving. I also think that people are more likely to start switching over to, not more likely, you can see the trend is moving from pharmaceutical to herbal supplements. People are trusting the earth again. And, we're converging our business. We're a couple trends. We have plant-based, we have herbal supplements, which is from instead of pharmaceuticals. And then we have, the third one is like eco-friendly sustainability, and
Okay.
like that's not why we do it. It's what we believe in, what we support. But people are starting to choose brands that want to make an impact on the planet, not so much like politically and socially, but really like environmentally. And
Right.
so that's something that we're really banking on as growth, that will continue to fuel our demand. I think the thing that's really exciting about that is when we make money, we plant more trees, we make
Yeah.
a larger impact. And I think we want to do stuff with algae. We want to like make more local like contributions and get more involved physically. Like there's more we can do if we have more capital. But like if
Right.
we don't have enough capital, then we can't do as much and make such an impact. And I'm not just saying that to like convince people to buy.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
true. Like, I hope to one day have like a sustainability environment focus like director on the team that's like reviewing everything we do soup to nuts, to make sure that we're really tight and we're being climate neutral, carbon neutral, like we're B Corp. Those are things we're working on now. But you know, it's great to have a business that intertwines both of those
Right. Yeah.
impacts.
No, it totally makes sense. I love that. Speaking of, I had one question. You kind of have hit on it a little bit and you mentioned it there. One thing on here that I like to ask founders is just your philosophy. You've done you've started a few different companies, but what is your thoughts on bootstrapping versus fundraising, or when's the right time to think about fundraising? You seem like to have a decent amount of experience with that. So just thought for my audience, I know I've gotten a lot of questions on just like how to know when to do those steps, and just curious from your thought, from your or experience, what you've
Yeah.
learned and what's the best course of action.
It's interesting because we all see the winners of the world. They raise money, they do the formula. They raise 4 to 5 million seed round. they go to the right agency for the right branding, they have the right PR firm, and then by the time they launch, they've burned through like 2.5 million of it or 2 million of it. And, the ones that win, which, are like Casper's, maybe they're not winning now, but like we
You
look at
sure?
sort of like these brands that are like have done so well, they follow the formula, but like they can't get sold. They're just too big. And the reason why they're too big is because they keep on fundraising to beat the other valuations because they've already raised so much. And so you get kind of caught in this cycle. And the one thing that so with Rise and for Plant People, we bootstrapped. And like we're really proud of that. I mean, we really hustled, and we also there's a couple reasons why it's amazing is because like one is like you don't answer to anyone. And
Sure.
like,
Oh yeah.
I hope you have good intentions if you're starting a company, but like, we have really good intentions, or we like to think so. And so like, we have no other reason to like perform except that we wanted to make an impact in the beginning. And so, we had humble beginnings. We put our personal savings into Plant People. So did I with Rise. So did some of the team members, my co-founders at Rise. Um, and it proves you own more of the business. And so when you start getting traction, you have way more leverage because investors want to invest at better terms for you, your better terms in investment. If you've shown traction, you've personally put your money in, or like gone like a friend to give you a loan, or you've hustled and you've closed your first account instead of hiring a ton of people. So I
Right.
always say that like you need to first off, once you get a market, you need to learn a lot. Like you're going to learn so much. You may change your business because you're learning. And so if you've already raised and used up a ton of money that you've raised, you've given up the company a very large percentage because it was a dream you were pitching. And then you may have to change the business very quickly, or it may not go as well as planned. And so I always say to people is like, try to bootstrap where you can. Don't give up too much of the company. You know, become and create a hustle culture, because when we tell people on the team, people join the team, people can like feel the hustle. And it's because the way, my Rise co-founders, but even more recently, like new hires have joined Plant people can feel that Gabe and I have been hustling for a very long time.
That's
And
awesome.
it creates this sort of hustle culture versus coming in and like you've raised a ton of money and like everyone gets new computers, everyone gets like, it's like we have all these parties
Scrappiness.
and stuff that
Yeah.
there's like a sense of scrappiness. And I think it makes people more self-sufficient in their day-to-day because of that culturally. And then the other thing is when you're going to fundraise after you've proven in the first 6 months or a year or at least or whatever that you've been able to do so much, you go into a fundraising pitch and like investors want a piece of that. You're going to move with or without them. They're not like a roadblock to use your success. They just want to fuel it. And
Right.
so like you just have more leverage on terms. You give up less of the companies. It makes conversations fundraising much easier because you're proven. Hopefully it's like good numbers because you've proven yourself. But I'd say like my experience has been with Rise and Plant People is that investors, because we bootstrap for so long, that they've been really impressed because what we've been able to do with so little. So
That's awesome. Yeah. It sounds like, kind of the bootstrap until you need more capital for a good reason type of move sounds like the best way to do it. Has there been challenges with bootstrapping as far as just like cash flow and trying to keep things afloat at times, or have you guys done a pretty good job at both Rise and Plant People to kind of keep fueling the ship per se?
yeah, so Rise, we had a lot of top line revenue. The margins weren't as great as it is with Plant People. I mean, beverage in general is not the best margin. I think like what was nice is, as I mentioned earlier, is Kegs was bringing in a lot of revenue at the time. But the thing with Rise is we were building out like a facility. No one could can those cans or do the kegs the way we wanted it. And so we had to like get money somehow, you know, to do that. And then I would
Right.
also say that like even though I was working on Rise for a period of time, it was actually called like a different name at the time. And then I met my co-founders, like, 6 to 8 months later. Um, I think like when you have a larger sort of co-founding team, you're like top heavy. And so, you have to pay each other, even though you're not paying that much, you're paying, if you have 5 co-founders, you're paying 5x that little amount of money. Whereas like
Right.
Gabe and I, we've been paid like less than a lot of people on the team or almost everyone on the team for a very long time. And there's only two of us, but if you have four of you, then it's 4x. And
Yeah.
so, for me, that was much easier. It made Plant People a lot easier to sort of operate in the beginning. And And then I would also say that like, with plant people, launching with CBD at the height of or prior to the trend height is that the margins were just really good. I mean, it was such a new product. Now it's getting a bit more competitive. Prices are dropping, and so margins, were really, really strong in the beginning. I mean, they've actually gone better for us, even though price drops have happened, just
Oh, great.
because we have a lot more leverage.
Yeah.
And costs have gone down because the supply for CBD is very low now. I mean, very
That's
high. There's a lot of it.
right.
Um, so yeah, hopefully that answers your
No,
question. I would say
100%.
like a challenge aside from like sort of headcount is, um, you can't always do what all these cool companies are doing. Like you can't do Subway ads when, you see some brand doing it. But I would say that like you have to problem solve on like what you can do. And I found that when you hustle and you figure out your ways of doing it with like less money, I actually think that like it goes much further in a certain way because you're doing so many of less costly things at
Right.
once that it kind of like makes a larger impact.
Yeah, totally makes sense. No, that's awesome. You kind of already answered this question earlier on when you talked about you just setting up a stand outside of a Whole Foods. But if you had to give, young entrepreneurs or anyone who's really wanting to become an entrepreneur that's listening to the podcast, what is like the one key in your mind from going to 0 to 1? So, thinking of a concept and actually creating a product and starting to sell it. What is like the key thing that you've learned that's gone from concept to business? And I know it's kind of a loaded question. There's probably tons of
Well,
things, but
I think the one thing I would just say is like just stop meeting with people. Like obviously get learnings and learn what other people have done, but like get to market. I think like that's the biggest thing for me. Um, I would also say that putting together a fundraising deck, like even if you don't show anyone, helps you solidify what you want to do. I think a lot of
oh yeah,
entrepreneurs think that they're solving so many problems because they'll meet with people and be like, I have this idea, and this person's like, oh my god, I would use that like for my college kid, and then the other person's like, oh my god, I put it in my gym, and so they like say they're doing everything. I think it's really important to like do one thing and do it really well. I also think that what makes your job much easier is a product that sells itself. So if you have a product that's like 80, like 80%, I always say like 80% of like the battle of starting a company is having a product that sells itself. And then like 20% of it is like, how do you market and message it? And then 10% is like the hustle. So you're like at 110%.
got it. Okay,
And so like you can't do like have the 110% without like the 80, the 20, or the 10. I mean, you can get to
that makes
100
sense.
and be a brand, but like if you really want to like take off, you really got to fight the good fight.
Love it. That's great advice. No, totally. That
I
totally
don't
makes
even
sense.
know if that answered your question.
100%. No, it did. It
Okay.
definitely did. It definitely answered the
Okay, great.
question. I
Glad to
think
hear it.
no, that was actually a really good answer. I think to your point, having a product that sells itself might be something that's an oversight for a lot of people, and they're just trying to work their ass off and do 1,000 different things instead
Yeah.
of getting that 80% down.
The one thing I would say now, like thinking back to like my old like roommate room when I was starting Rise is, you're like, how do I like get to this thing? So I'd say like, okay, I need money to do this. And I'd be like, okay, if I need money and it's like, and for the people who can't see on this podcast is like, I'm putting my hand like high up and like as if you have to attain to something, this like level, how do I get there? And then actually writing the steps to doing that.
Oh,
So, because every day I think when, especially for first time entrepreneurs, which I was at one point, is like, you feel like you're kind of all over the place. You feel like you need to do this, you need to do that, and then you meet someone for coffee. It's like, oh, you need to do this, you need to go to this trade show. There's all these things, but if you zero in on like, how do you make actionable steps on a daily basis to do it, and it's like sort of like a checklist every day that you look at, it
yeah.
makes it way more doable. Because I think as a first-time entrepreneur, there's just too many things to do, and everyone's saying this and that, and especially for a solo founder, it's like you got to just have some sort of way of like action steps and action items and steps to get to certain level.
Love that. Love that. And I'm a nerd for that kind of like optimization stuff. So that kind of goes into
Yeah.
one of my last questions I had for you, Hudson, was what do you use? Whether is it paper and pen? Do you have some apps? Is it Excel? What do you use to kind of like build out your goals, whether it's, personal plant people goals, and then how do you get that down to like daily tasks, to your point, and like actually taking meaningful steps? Like, what do you use to do all that?
Yeah, so I've tried it all. I've done like all the apps and stuff like that. The one thing that I always come back to, and I've agreed, this is what works. I'm gonna
You
keep on
sound like
doing
me.
it.
This is what I
I
have like a daily battle with myself on like what I'm using.
Yeah, but I'm now really comfortable with it. And my whole thing, what I do now is, and I've learned this is actually really good, is just don't overthink it. Like what I found is like if you do Google Doc or you do like Evernote, you kind of like tuck away these notes and tasks,
Yes.
unless you're really good at like every day going in there and like looking. But I found that like the reason why when we're young we write with a pen and paper and you learn how to like write things down and you have to like repeat stories and stuff like that is because you as your brain as a human you like remember things better.
Right.
And so what I do is every single time, so I have a couple of sheets in my notebook. One is a page for like marketing, a page for sales, a page for digital product, a page for ops, a page for every department on the team.
Okay.
And how I set up the teams is I do a weekly check-in on, it's sort of like a sprint model. So every week it's like a check-in on like last week and what we've done and then what we're doing this week.
Okay.
And so what I do is I have just a laundry list of bulleted things to remind myself in those meetings and bring up or check in on. And so that's what I do. So every day, whenever there's something happening, I don't like interrupt someone with Slack. I mean, the team, if they're listening, probably disagrees, but I would probably say that I write something down to save in for that check-in. And so basically what ends up happening is I build these sort of like checklists that I will eventually cross off. And at the end and the beginning of every week, I kind of go through each department. And if something hasn't happened or, that's sort of more for a managing style, but also for myself. So I have a page that's sort of like my checklist of things that I have to do and be on top of myself. So every day, and Gabe, my co-founder, will definitely substantiate this. I basically start following, like when I have my cup of coffee, I like go through my list and I start following up on things, whether it's Slack or email or checking in on things or start working on things myself. And
Okay.
so I always start at the beginning of every week, every day, my own list and see if I've done it. And if
Got it.
not, like I check in and I am like the king of following up. And for the team, I do like a Monday, Friday sort of, or weekly check-in sort of their list. And I think like the big thing for me is I don't like when things fall through the cracks. I really don't. It stresses me out
Yep.
and it frustrates me. And so, it's whether it's for managing people or it's really for me. It really helps to just have a notebook and a running list because if you overdo it and you spend too much time building lists and all these like crazy note cards and stuff like that, it's too much. So
Love
hopefully
it.
that
No, yeah,
helps.
it's funny. I've kind of the same thing. I use a thing called bullet journaling. I'm sure you've probably heard of that if you're in
Yeah,
the
yeah, for
notebook game.
sure.
So it's similar. But yeah, I do agree. There's something about writing it down helps you remember, and it's like a physical thing. It's not going to move.
100%.
You can't get erased. You can't, like, your Wi-Fi can't go out and you can't see it.
Yeah.
It's physical. It's there. It's got to move on. I like that idea though of kind of having a page for every, like, almost like,
Team,
you
yeah.
call it department or team, but it could be like just categories or whatever you're working
Yeah,
on
I mean,
each week.
I know that like I
Oh
know
wow,
that
look at all that.
the podcast can't see, but that's like right there,
YouTube
that's
can
like
see it.
that's
That's
the
for 1
marketing.
week for
Yeah.
marketing.
Yeah.
That's 1 week of
No, no,
marketing.
no, 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 no. That's been like a running tally. And so what I do next level is when I run out of space, I do post-its of the list that I basically go through, and at the end of the week, I rip it off
Okay,
and I go through it and consolidate the post-its, or I add to the master list. So I have
got
like a
it.
master list per page, and the post-its are sort of like I'm in a meeting and I like need to write it down.
Yeah, yeah, got it.
Yeah,
Wow,
it's
you
a
have quite,
little
so you have
nuts.
quite, no, you have quite the strategy here. I love it. That's great.
Yeah, it's a little freaky.
The last real question for you, I like to ask everyone this. You're an intelligent guy, you've done a lot of cool stuff. Do you have like a book, a podcast, a source of knowledge that you recommend to people to, read, listen to?
I mean, I do the basics, sort of, how I built this guy, Roz.
Love that one.
That's always really inspiring because, to be honest, like as a founder, and I'm sure people who aren't founders like think this is a ridiculous thing, but you really, as a founder, feel like you're going crazy all the time. And you're in it sort of for the long term, and you see all these other competitors in the market or just other brands doing all these things, and you just feel like you have so much to do. It's just nice to hear personal stories where people like have been through ups and downs, and it reminds you why you're doing this and that other people have done it before you. And so that's been really nice. And then I do like Taste Radio obviously is a great one, similar to how I built this. A little bit more focused, I guess, on like consumer goods.
Right.
And then I've been listening to like consumer VC stuff. I listened to Esther Perel, which is
Okay.
like relationship stuff. And that always helps with like how to deal with like working relationships, obviously personal relationships. Um, and then one thing that I do is I don't actually read that many books. I used to read a lot of business books. There's two books that I can recommend: Contagious and Purple Cow. Like I always thought those were really great books.
Awesome.
But I think where I get a lot of learnings is reading. And I used to do like the TechCrunch and stuff. That's where it kind of evolved. But I still kind of go back to like the like New York Times and Economist and sort of like these sort of like worldly publications, because when I read those, I get these sort of like out of the box ideas.
Oh,
And it's usually when I'm reading like, the business focused stuff, I'm getting these just ideas of like what very large corporations are doing. And I find that really helpful because it steps out of this sort of like startup world,
right. Kind of
and
gets it.
helps you like think out of the box, but like in a more structured world.
Got it. No, I love that. It's kind of like backwards from what a lot of our generation probably thinks, which I actually like. Think that's a really cool idea. Like,
Yeah,
a lot of us try to stay. I feel like a lot of people like kind of frown on some of the major big corporate type structures, but that's exactly probably why there's a lot of benefit in it.
for sure.
Um, awesome. Really the last things then are, how can people try Plant People? What's the best place to go try it?
So I guess I will create a promo code for you
Oh,
at
cool. There
this
we go.
point.
Sweet. Yeah, there we go.
Um, it will be Shane White. I'll give
Love
you
it.
like 15-20% off. And
Okay.
so I guess I'll just say it now. It's Shane White 20, just so I
Okay.
can make the
Love
call.
it. This is the first
And
time
so
this has
that everyone
happened on the
knows.
podcast.
Okay, great. So our website's the best place to do it. Obviously, like it's amazing. We have incredible marketing emails and like content that we send to people as well. So it's not like you're just buying a product that's done. And so every order counts. You plant the tree for every product sold. And then some of the retailers that I mentioned, you can always go to there. But I would probably say online is the easiest. And if you're living in sort of like the Northeast area, it delivers within like a day.
Oh, cool.
Any order helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. And then if people want to follow you and get a hold of you, what's the best way for that? Do you have socials you like to share or anything?
Yeah, for sure. So my Instagram is my full name, Hudson Gaines-Ross, and then my LinkedIn is Hudson Gaines-Ross.
Love it.
So
I'll add those links
uh,
in here too.
yeah, great.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, Hudson, thank you so much for the time. I feel like this was awesome. It was great to learn more about you and all of the businesses you started. And we
Thanks.
wish, Plant People the best and the success through an exciting rest of 2020, I'm sure.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and thank you for the opportunity. This was awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Hudson. Have a good one. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.